exciting topic that is the new UCAS tariff. And I should probably warn you that if we were to have a health and safety assessment, we'd probably all be at risk of death by PowerPoint, because I do have a lot of PowerPoints to get through, but I really wanted you to have those in your pack because I will gallop through some of the work that we're doing on the new tariff, and I did want to talk a little bit about advisor track and just talk a little bit also about how UCAS engages with teachers and advisors during the year on some of our key work. Okay then, so the new UCAS tariff, at the moment we've launched a feedback exercise, and it'd be really interesting to know how many of you have seen it. So we've sent out a technical feedback document with a qualifications list and questionnaires. So questionnaires to higher education providers and questionnaires to schools and colleges to give us feedback on the new UCAS tariff. So anyone put their hand up if they've seen it? Okay. So quite a small number actually. So I think it would be great if you could go back and find out who is leading on your response to the new tariff, because we do really want to hear your views. So how has the new tariff work come about then? Well, basically back in 2012, UCAS completed its qualification information review, which was quite an extensive consultation exercise with schools and colleges, higher education providers and other stakeholders to really understand what the qualification information needs were in terms of helping people get through the admissions process. And it also looked at the current tariff. And ultimately the outcome of that was that higher education providers in particular wanted more clear information about the different range of qualifications that were coming through at level 3, and issues were raised with the current tariff. The result of that consultation exercise led to more guidance and case studies being produced by UCAS, some guidance for applicants who were quite confused about the current tariff that we have in operation, and some new qualification information profiles which are designed to be concise and set out in a consistent way to ensure that admission staff in HE can really see the key information that they want to know about different level 3 qualifications. So we've now produced quips on access to HE diplomas, apprenticeship frameworks, a range of international qualifications, and the UK benchmark qualifications, so the qualifications that are most commonly presented to HE admissions in terms of the application process. And all of that work has been supported by an NQuIS project advisory group, which is made up of higher education provider representatives, school and college representatives, colleagues from ASCL and AOC, and SPA, the Supporting Professionalism in Admissions group. So, in addition to that information, the issues that were raised with the current tariff were around things like it's unclear how the points are actually derived, issues around it appearing to be biased towards academic qualifications, so the process is based on the A-level as a benchmark, and involved lots of academic reviews by experts and technical groups, poring over lots of information about individual qualifications to assess their suitability in terms of progression into HE using particular domains. And ultimately that, you could say, makes that process not so suitable for vocational qualifications or non-traditional qualifications like the access to HE diplomas. It's also a very expensive process, which has been paid for to date by awarding organisations. So what that means is that only awarding organisations that are willing and able to pay for their qualifications to come onto the tariff are actually on the tariff. As you can see, about 32% of courses for 2014 entry actually make reference to the tariff. So on the whole, Most institutions don't actually use the tariff in their admissions practices, but they do all use it in terms of management information and HESA data returns. So a small percentage of the QIR respondents did say that they wanted the tariff to continue, but those were the institutions that were using the tariff and they do find it helpful as a tool for admissions purposes. So as a result of that, it was decided that a new tariff should be developed, and the NQuest Project Advisory Group set itself these design principles to ensure that any new tariff ends up being better than the current tariff that we have now. So those design principles are around, having a transparent, clear process, so it's easy to understand how the tariff points have been allocated, but it should meet the needs of the HE sector, so ultimately support them in terms of being a metric that can be used for management information purposes and or be used for admissions purposes if an institution wants to do that. It should be cost effective, so cost less than the current tariff, so that it doesn't need to be paid for by awarding organisations, which means in theory that any level 3 UK accredited qualification can come onto the tariff. It should be comprehensive, so be able to treat all qualifications, academic and vocational qualifications, in the same way. It should be able to withstand the level of qualifications reform that we're seeing, so sustainable and flexible enough to be able to manage the changes that occur to all qualifications, and most importantly, support fairness. So it should be a process that can be applied systematically to all qualifications and not really introduce any sort of subjective bias into the process. We already have a regulatory system with regulators charged for ensuring that qualifications that are accredited are robust, do what they say, do what it says on the tin. So if it's meant to be a certain size and a certain grade structure at the level 3 standard, we should be able to trust and work with that. So on the basis of that, over the course of the year, the NQuest Project Advisory Group looked at a number of different new tariff options, all of which were based on a new mathematical model. So there were kind of 5 key options, if you like, at the beginning of the year. But they all worked on this principle of a kind of size multiplied by grade approach to getting this new tariff number. And those 5 options went through a series of testing and modelling activities through the UCAS candidate data to check that they weren't going to negatively impact on any particular type of learner. So we're able to do that looking at the sort of the Polar 2 quintile data that we have. And we also modelled the new tariff options through the HESA data to look at the impact in terms of the data that they have, which then sort of supports things like league tables. We also ran the options through a number of, if you like, qualitative reviews. So we do have a tariff advisory group at the moment, and we asked them to consider the tariff options and think about, would they work in terms of the decisions they make to the full range of qualifications that they're presented with at the moment. And we asked a number of higher education providers, obviously, to think about, the implications for them as institutions in terms of managing this new tariff. So the option that kind of really came out as being the most appropriate one is this one, which is really based on 4 size bands and 12 grade bands. And as I said at the beginning, the actual total tariff points are determined by multiplying size by grade. So in terms of the size bands, we've got 4 size bands because really the 4 size bands are enough to ensure that established relationships that exist between the key, if you like, benchmark qualifications and on the whole the level 3 qualifications that are on the tariff at the moment. 4 bands is enough to kind of establish the differences that we need there. And we didn't want more than 4 size bands because it can overcomplicate the process but also it can overemphasise the importance of size. And one of the key criticisms of the current tariff is that there is a view that some qualifications have been given too many tariff points because of size. It also means that we can retain the AS qualification as half the size of an A-level, but the size bands give us enough manoeuvrability to ensure that other qualifications, like the Scottish Highers, can be positioned in between an AS and an A-level because they're at that different size. The Welsh Baccalaureate is being significantly revised for first teaching in 2015. So we didn't include that to the same extent in all our modelling and testing, but it is expected that that new Welsh Bac will be the same size as an A-level and graded in a similar way to A-levels. So the grading structure will change. So these are the size bands. So you can see that they go up in points, up to 4, depending on the number of guided learning hours or notional learning hours in Scotland. And what we've got here are just some examples of where qualifications slot into the size bands. The qualification list that we launched with the feedback exercise shows the size band and grade band for all 55 or so qualifications that are on the tariff and is broken down by all their different grades. So you can see exactly where every qualification slots into the size bands and the grade band points that it gets. So moving on to the grade bands then. So slightly confusingly, we've got a grade band structure of 12 grade bands, but we start the points at 3 to give us a sufficient multiplier, and the top point, the highest point, is 14. So that's the maximum point you can get on the grading scale. And the Inquiz Project Advisory Group had to come up with this level 3 scale. So it had to determine where is an appropriate bottom of that scale and where should the top be. And so it was decided that the bottom should be the AS grade E and the top should be the A star for the A level. And it's been decided, and this is part of our proposal, that ultimately that is it. So the scale is finite. So qualifications that are considered to be higher than that either have to come into that scale, or really they're operating at level 4, or if they're lower, level 2. And you can see that the grading band structure here also enables the Scottish Highers to be positioned again in between the AS and the A level. So again, the group really felt that this model, whilst we looked at options that had fewer grade bands, that this one had enough to enable us to position key UK benchmark qualifications precisely enough without having an overcomplicated scale. So we've looked at all sorts of numbers of grade bands, I have to say, and it didn't really help us. So one of the key things that we're proposing in this new tariff model, whilst our principle has been as much as is possible to have minimum disruption in terms of moving from the current tariff to the new tariff, because obviously we're not working with a blank sheet of paper. We do have a list of tariff qualifications that do have, if you like, established values, and we don't want to cause huge disruption with moving to a new tariff. The group did think it was really important to take this opportunity to address the issue that came through very strongly in the QIR around the AS. So the AS has been criticised for having too many tariff points under the current system because it gets 50% of an A-level tariff points. And Ofqual state very clearly that an AS is less demanding than an A-level. And Ofqual have done lots of consultation exercises which show that on the whole, the groups they've consulted with think 40% is about right. So we've repositioned the AS to be 40% in our new tariff proposals, and we are looking for feedback on what we've done there. I think it is actually only the pre-U short course from memory that aligns itself explicitly in its accredited, regulated, qualification specification to the AS. So that qualification has also been repositioned to be 40%. And in our qualifications list, not only do we show the current tariff points alongside the new tariff points, but we've also come up with a, if you like, a change impact rating. So in the quals list, you can see how much change the new points mean for each qualification. What this slide does, and we've got this, I think, better presented in the feedback exercise document, is it tries to show some examples of applicant profiles that you might see. So, learners coming through with 3 A-levels or an IB or a pre-U set of qualifications, to show you what the new tariff might look like in those terms, because ultimately, applicants don't present themselves, generally speaking, with one qualification. And we've got the numbers presented in the feedback document for these applicant profiles, and then we also sort of try to show the percentage change using a 3 A-level applicant as, if you like, that kind of standard thing that we're measuring against. So again, you can see what we think the difference will mean in terms of moving to a new tariff. So, ultimately, we're very clear that moving to a new tariff means lots of change for everybody in some respects. And we've tried to go through the impact of moving to the new tariff and do as much as we can to try and mitigate any issues that all the different stakeholders might face in terms of moving to the new tariff. So ultimately, students are going to face this situation of having a new tariff system, which, whilst it doesn't really do much in terms of the positioning of most qualifications, we are proposing to change that position of the AS. So the AS will be repositioned at 40%. So it's really important that there is clear information out there to make them clear about these things. The second area of impact is really around the sort of secondary school and college area, so, affecting all of you, is how to ensure that clear information and advice is provided to all the different stakeholders that you deal with. Think about, what are the implications on curriculum planning. So our NQuIS Project Advisory Group, school and college reps, felt that on balance, the new tariff wouldn't make a significant difference to their curriculum design, that ultimately they would stay focused on what is the best qualification for their learners. And some of the feedback that we're getting through already from schools and colleges is around all the other changes that are happening to the qualifications and curriculum policy developments in terms of the AS being decoupled in England, etc. There are also implications in terms of the implementation timeline. So we are proposing that the new tariff is implemented for the HE admission cycle 2017. And we have heard from some of our school and college reps on the project that they would prefer 2018. And that's why we've got a question on the timeline in the questionnaire. So schools and colleges telling us that perhaps you'd like more time to allow for all the qualification reforms to bed in and to then manage the new tariff. In terms of the impact on universities and colleges as HE course providers, all their systems and processes in terms of managing data that uses qualifications that are then reported back to HESA in terms of the data returns, those will need to be updated to manage the new tariff. We're also very conscious that the tariff is used as one indicator of about 8 to support the information that gets published in university league tables. Peter talked about some of the other important factors like student satisfaction, actual grades achieved, going on into employment, etc. But qualifications held on entry is used by HESA, to analyse performance too, and that is based on the UCAS tariff. So there is a potential for change there, but our modelling and testing has shown that really the key area of impact is in Scotland, because we have positioned the Scottish advanced hires in line with the A-levels, and the Scottish hires are positioned in between the A-levels and the AS. So you see positive movement in terms of what happens to to Scottish institutions in terms of the HESA data returns on that one factor. And if you take away that the Scottish picture, you see impact on one higher education provider in terms of this factor, which could contribute to league table positioning. So we have tables in there which show that, to be really transparent about that's what we see. And ultimately, by providing the qualification list to higher education providers, they'll be able to run it through their systems, see what impact it has on them as an institution with their particular applicant profiles. Oops, wrong way. Okay, so with all that change, why would we change the tariff? Well, it really comes back to the issues with the current tariff and the design principles that I talked about at the beginning. We really do think that this new tariff is more transparent. It is easy to see how the points are allocated. It should meet the needs of the HE sector in so much as, it will be more efficient and cost effective. It won't rely on awarding organisations paying to have their qualifications to be put forward. Within the proposals, we're offering a kind of annual process whereby higher education providers can contribute and share their views to a list of qualifications that could be added to the new tariff, and then the simple size by grade calculation just applied. It should be comprehensive and be able to cover academic, vocational and non-traditional qualifications in the same way. And we do think it will be sustainable and flexible. So, Wales have come out and said that their AS is going to be 40%. The current tariff can't really cope with these sorts of policy differences emerging with important UK benchmark qualifications. So we do have to do something. And we do think it's fair. We haven't seen any negative impacts for particular applicants, and we can apply the new tariff systematically across the range of qualifications, and it could be applied to international qualifications as well. So, in terms of the implementation timescale, basically the feedback exercise closes the end of this week. If there's support to go ahead and our June UCAS board agrees to the new tariff, we'll publish the new tariff points this summer for implementation in 2017, if there is support for that timescale. And that would mean a switchover date of the 1st of September in terms of UCAS systems and processes and HE systems that rely or use the tariff. Ultimately, universities, colleges that offer HE courses would need to provide information about their use of the tariff if they use it for admissions purposes in advance of that. But we think that the 2017 implementation date is important because it will still give learners 1 year's notice of new tariff points a year before 2-year courses start. And it aligns with the majority of qualifications reforms happening across the UK. So this is that timeline, so you've got that in your pack, so I won't go through it, but you can see that most of the qualification reforms hit in terms of learners coming through with a new A-level in that kind of 2017 HE entry cycle. And we have this on our website now, and we're keeping it up to date as we hear more from our colleagues in different countries about their qualification reform. So do look out for it there. So the next steps, I think I've run through this really, but ultimately if we can publish the new tariff points this summer, UCAS will then roll out an extensive programme of communication support to ensure that we have successful implementation. So we've got questions in the feedback exercise which ask you and higher education providers, what support do you need from UCAS or from higher education providers to help this switchover work well? So So do please tell us your views on those things. Some of the feedback that we've had to date, and these numbers have gone up, so it's about 208 schools now and about 78 higher education providers that have responded. So, you know, some thinking that it will be a more transparent, simple process. Some schools saying they still don't get the AS tariff and why we're repositioning it. Higher education providers saying, you know, it will be great if it can include international qualifications because they have to do a lot of hard work around those qualifications, but it could lead to a lot of upheaval in terms of their systems and processes, and obviously some concern about the impact it might have on league tables. So that's the new tariff in a nutshell, as fast as I can possibly go through an incredible number of slides. But do ask me questions either at the end or when we're having lunch. In terms of advisor track, my colleagues asked me to just kind of run through the key features of advisor track, and I guess some of the pitfalls too. I don't know how many of you use advisor track. Can we have a quick show of hands? Yeah, okay, so quite a lot of you. So you probably know more about it than I do actually. But basically, advisor track is found here on this part of the UCAS, UCAS.com. But you do have to be logged in as a UCAS correspondent to find it. So one of the issues that we hear is that you can't find it. So you do need to be logged on as a UCAS person. And then you can see here that you've got kind of three features: applicant status reports, permissions, and search for applicants. So just moving on to search for applicants. So here you can obviously determine which types of applicants you want to find and sort of obviously see where they are in the application process. So I think some of the questions we get sometimes are, you know, one applicant isn't coming through, we can't find them. So when an applicant is added, we automatically tick a box which says confirming you are happy to be listed on this process. If the applicant unticks that box, then they won't appear. So sometimes if you've got a missing person, it could be for that reason. And this is the applicant, this isn't the applicant status report, but this is how you can sort of see applicants, and you can click on their individual names and check where they are in the process. This is the wonderful applicant status report. It really is just a dump of data, and the team obviously do get a lot of feedback about, wouldn't it be nice to kind of present it a bit better. It is available, I believe, on the 1st of every month, and you do have to download it if you want to keep it, because it is then replaced by the next month's report. Some questions coming through about what does column E mean. This is information about campus data apparently, and there is a code that helps you understand what I think it's column G means in terms of the qualifications that are listed there, or the kind of the code numbers. So that's the applicant status report, and you can see it shows, you know, where the applicant is, so not placed, etc. on that list. Oops, and to just go back one more, this, confusingly, is the final status report, which I believe you get something like the 1st of September, which shows exactly where everybody has ended up. And you get a final status report on the 1st of October. I'm sure one day we'll be able to update it to call it the final status report. It is quite hard to change UCAS systems because they're all based on very old legacy IT processes, but I do understand there's a log of getting all these things changed. So again, sometimes queries come through about, you know, one of my learners isn't on the list of being placed, and sometimes that can be because they were placed after the report was issued, or they were placed outside of the UCAS system. So that's Advisor Track very quickly. It's one of a series of reports that are available to you to help you look at trends in terms of the admissions processes. And then very quickly, the final thing I wanted to talk to you about is some of the I guess, forums and conferences that UCAS have that you can engage with if you want to help you through the system. So we have a number of scheme delivery forums at UCAS which support things like advisor track and our undergraduate and postgraduate processes. But we also have groups like the Secondary Education Forum, which is specifically set up comprising teachers and advisors to give us feedback on some of our products and services and the issues you face and the things you would like from us in terms of helping the admissions process work more smoothly, and to also help us understand the issues that you're facing so that we can hopefully help you a bit more. So it's made up of representatives across the UK from the sort of secondary education sector, and we have a list of members on our website here, and people can join as other people leave. So if you'd like more information about that group, please do go to that part of the website or email that address. We also have about 13 teachers and advisors conferences throughout the year, held regionally, or sometimes just in the north and the south. They fall into about sort of 4 different categories. So one is around getting into HE, which is really for new advisors, if you're kind of new to this area. Other conferences are a bit more about the applications process in a bit more detail and give more opportunity to discuss issues in more depth and meet higher education providers and talk about things with them. There's also a competitive admissions series of conferences to talk about the issues around, medicine, law, etc., which are difficult to get into. And then there's the kind of national flagship conference, which brings all of that together and has a lot more attendees and a lot more input from higher education providers from the admissions departments across the UK. And obviously information can be obtained on our website about getting involved in those too.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.